Sometimes there is opportunity for me to get to review people's collections, and if time permits, it adds a great level of insight into what other people have and just how they approach the watch hobby. The most interesting collections are the ones that are outliers for the most part, and I think this is a good example. This collection comes courtesy of NsSomething. He's very well known in our community, and he has a fascinating taste in watches. Why do I say that? Well, the majority of the pieces you see on the screen now are dress watches, and the real outlier is the sports watch. How often can we say that nowadays? Barely ever. And that was the point that really grabbed me at first. Then it was looking at the watches that he actually collects, JLC and Moser. As we know, the watches in the JLC collection are underrated, understated, extremely great value for money. And next door to his JLC pieces, he owns Moser watches. And Moser is a brand that attempts to go against the grain and create all sorts of unique pieces, since they were just bought a few years back and have been very adventurous in their approach. So we look at these three distinct tiers: sports, dress, and then in between we have something that is quite a blend of both, which is where I think Moser watches lie. So the first watch in the collection, the Tudor Peligros. It's been spoken about a lot on this platform. I have definitely spoken about it and said that it is a watch that truly is Tudor's brand. It's not Tudor trying to take elements from the Submariner, incorporate it into theirs. It is one of their solely original watches that I think lines up with models like the North Flag, for example. It uses not only snowflake hands, but a snowflake dial, with all sorts of little accents like depth, a bright blue color scheme, a full titanium case and bracelet, an innovative clasp system, and it's clear that this is his knockabout watch. The watch he wears when he's being more active, when he's going out somewhere, and needs something that is rugged, dependable, usable for any situation. And I really like the fact that it is this Tudor, the Pelagos, and not just your simple Black Bay, which I think still borrows too heavily from the Rolex brand when it comes to their styling. This piece is a lot more original and can proudly brandish the name Tudor on its dial. Then we look at the trio of JLC pieces. All of them are very unique in different ways, and I like the fact that to the casual observer, all of these watches look the same. They have a similar white silver dial, the same steel case, crocodile straps. You can tell that NsSomething really has quite a taste for this effect and this styling. So we have the sector dial, just your simple time and date reference that has to be one of the most beautiful modern retro-influenced sector dial watches to date. I've spoken highly about this watch before, and I'll link to a video about the series in the corner of the screen now. But this watch uses motifs like skeletonized needle hands, great highlights of blue on the dial, a very bold sector ring that runs around it entirely. It's elegant, understated, and complete, makes for a perfect everyday wearer. And then across from it we can address the Geophysic True Seconds. Now, if I'm not wrong, this is a model that was recreated from a piece that was made in and around the 50s. And this is a serious piece of watchmaking. Even though it just looks like your generic simple dress watch, the True Second is an automatic watch that has the same beats as you would expect from a quartz watch. So to the uninitiated, they would see you wearing this and think that you're wearing a quartz piece. But in fact, it is so accurate and so well regulated that it is quite a masterpiece from the JLC family. This watch really falls into its own category in the high horology segment. And many people don't appreciate the effect. I personally don't appreciate the ticking of quartz. But for a mechanical watch to achieve an effect like this, it is quite a statement. The elements that really attract me to this watch is the very lightly faded effect that the lume plots have received, and those pencil-styled hands that call back to models of that time period in the 50s and the 60s. How the quarters have double batons assigned to them. How the logo is also polished in steel or white gold. You might need to correct me about the material. It's a seriously complete watch with a very interesting complication that makes it so unique in the family. And then we move across to a chronograph, incorporating similar elements from both sides, the sector dial and the True Second. We see highlights of blue that could be assigned to the sector piece, but then we also see elements of polished steel, which is very much in line with the True Second model. And I would imagine that this piece was introduced in and around the same time as the Geophysic. But there are a few other details that make this watch unique. Like, for example, a pulsation dial, meaning that it was a piece made for a doctor with a medical background in mind, possibly. Just the simple use of text around the dial keeps it looking so elegant and understated. And we can't forget that this is an automatic JLC column wheel chronograph. So when you're dealing with all of these watches, the movements are the best. Even though they look extremely spare and simple, you as a wearer know that the watch is top of the line. And then we move across to Moser. Both of these watches, I would like to say, are pioneers. They have central seconds. And on first glance, you look at them and say, well, they are the same watch. But the styling of the two are different in a few places. While the variant with a blue fume dial is more of a sports-oriented piece, the standard watch with a silver dial, more elegantly styled leaf hands, is the dress piece. The watches have a similar case styling, but they are slightly different when you look at their lug lengths, the polishing on the surfaces, the crowns. You can see that the two models are built in a similar way but are quite different. And what makes the Pioneer with the blue face so interesting is that NsSomething just recently picked up a bracelet for this model, making it into a sports watch, essentially. A very high-end sports watch. Many of us may not know, but Moser is a very niche brand. It's a brand that many people don't buy into because they aren't popular. But you buy into this watch for the movement, the quality of the build, the gorgeous bridges that take up the entirety of the dial. Very pocket watch inspired in the way it has been arranged. And very much like the JLC pieces, it's a watch that flies under the radar. Simple, elegant, formal, but also quite active in the way it looks. So where I said that JLC is more of the dress watch, the Moser pieces can actually ride the line between something more sports-oriented and dress. So as a collection of 6, you see quite a rounded appreciation for the dress watch and less for the sports watch. But I really like that idea. So often today we are bombarded with Rolexes and Omegas, Patek Philippe's, and all of the watches that fall into that usual formula. Here we have 1 Tudor, 3 JLC pieces and 2 Mosers. And primarily the reason why I liked talking about this collection is because of its difference. That the sports watch isn't the entirety of the collection, and instead dress watches are more to his tastes. So I would like to take the time to thank NsSomething for sending these photos in and sharing his collection with all of us. All of these watches together gives us a greater respect for the hobby. And more importantly, what the community likes when it comes down to taste, value, style. There is always a lot to learn from collections like these. And I think the one underlying feature that we should take away from it is that we should not fall into the camp of following what everyone else is doing. This collection is a clear example of someone who really appreciates horology, watchmaking, various brands, and goes out of his way to look for watches that truly appeal to him, and him alone. It's always a pleasure looking at these collections because I think as a community we can learn a lot more about people's tastes, their individual styles, and ultimately, what makes for a great collection.